The stars were supposed to be full of life. That was what Captain Park had believed her entire life. She had dreamed of meeting aliens since she was a child looking up at the night sky and wondering who else was out there. Now, standing on the bridge of the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge, she finally had her answer. The universe was full of life. It was also full of death. "Captain, I'm picking up another debris field ahead," said her communications officer. His voice was quiet, almost hollow. They had seen too many debris fields in the past week. Walked to the main and stared at the floating wreckage, twisted metal, frozen bodies, the remains of what had once been a civilian transport ship. There were no survivors. There never were. "How many is that now?" she asked. 17 ships since we entered this sector," replied, "all destroyed within the last standard month." Chief Engineer Lee looked up from her console. Her face was pale. "Captain, some of those bodies are small, children. There were children on that ship." Closed her eyes for a moment. She had commanded military vessels for 15 years. She had seen combat. She had lost crew members. But this was different. This was slaughter on a scale she could not understand. "Any signs of who did this?" she asked. Tactical specialists studied his screens with sharp eyes. He was the youngest member of the bridge crew, but he had the best instincts. The weapon signatures match plasma cannons, but Captain, this ship had no weapons, no military value. It was just running. Running from what? Before anyone could answer, the ship's sensors detected another vessel approaching at high speed. It was small, damaged, trailing smoke and fire through the vacuum of space. Behind it came 3 larger ships, sleek and predatory, firing bright beams of energy. "That's a medical ship," said, reading the vessel's identification signals. "Medical Corps, and those ships chasing it are hunters." Made her decision in less than a second. Full power to engines, charge weapons, open a channel to those ships. "Captain," said carefully, "we're one ship, they're 3, and we don't know anything about their technology." "I know they're shooting at doctors," replied. "That's enough." The Horizon's Edge surged forward, placing itself between the medical ship and its hunters. The vessel slowed, confused by this strange new ship that had appeared from nowhere. Opened the channel. "Vessels, this is Captain Park of the Earth ship Horizon's Edge. You are attacking an unarmed medical vessel. Stand down immediately." The response came in a harsh, clicking language. The ship's translation systems worked quickly, converting the alien words to Korean. "Unknown vessel, you interfere in matters that do not concern you. They are our enemies. All move aside or be destroyed." Took the communicator. "I will not move aside. These are healers, not soldiers. If you want to destroy them, you will have to go through us first." There was a long silence. The ships hung in space, weapons still charged, considering this unexpected obstacle. Then slowly they turned and flew away. They did not understand why this strange vessel would risk destruction for strangers, but they were not willing to find out. Let out a breath she had been holding. "They're gone." "For now," said, "they'll be back with more ships." Nodded. "Then let's help those doctors before that happens. Tell them we're friendly. Bring them aboard." The medical ship docked with the Horizon's Edge an hour later. They were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across their faces. They moved slowly, carefully, as if the universe might hurt them at any moment. Their leader was a physician named, and when he saw the human crew, he stared at them with all 6 eyes wide with wonder. "You are new," he said, his voice soft and musical. "We have never seen your kind before." "We're human," said. "From Earth. We just developed faster-than-light travel 2 years ago. This is our first mission beyond our own region of space." Made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. 2 years. You are infants. Bobby's taking their first steps into a burning house." "What do you mean?" Led them to a window and pointed at the distant stars. "The war has raged for 3,000 years. 3,000 years of death, Captain. Entire planets burned. Species driven to extinction. Billions upon billions dead. Felt cold. 3,000 years, how is that possible? Hasn't anyone tried to stop it? The Galactic Council governs 10,000 worlds, explained. They have laws, ancient laws. One of those laws says they cannot interfere in regional conflicts. They call our war a regional conflict. They have watched us die for 3,000 years and done nothing. Stepped forward, his face twisted with disbelief. They just watch. They have the power to stop this and they choose not to. They believe interference prolongs conflict. They believe it is better to let the fire burn itself out. They sit in their great halls and debate philosophy while my people die, while children float frozen in space. Was crying now, tears running silently down her cheeks. That's not philosophy, that's murder. Looked at her with something like hope in his 6 eyes. You think so, your people think so. Of course we think so, said. Her hands were shaking with anger. On Earth, we have a long and ugly history. We've had our own wars, our own genocides, our own moments of looking away while people suffered. But we also learned, eventually, that watching evil happen and doing nothing makes you part of that evil. The Council would not agree. Then the Council is wrong. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched his hand with his long, thin fingers. His skin was cool, like water from a mountain stream. Captain Park, he said, in 3,000 years, you are the first outsider to say those words to us. You are the first to call what is happening wrong. You are the first to help. Looked at her crew. She saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. They had come to space looking for wonder. They had found suffering instead, and none of them could simply look away. She said, tell me everything. Tell me about this war. Tell me about the Council. Tell me how we can help. The physician began to speak and the humans listened. Outside, the stars continued to burn, cold and distant. For 3,000 years, the universe had looked away from the dying. But now, something new had arrived, something that refused to close its eyes. The humans had come, and nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Han had served Earth for 40 years. She had commanded fleets during the Mars Rebellion. She had negotiated peace during the Pacific Crisis. She had seen humanity at its worst and at its best, but nothing had prepared her for the report from the horizon's edge. She read it 3 times, alone in her office in Seoul, while rain fell against the windows. 3,000 years of war, billions dead, a galactic government that watched and did nothing. It seemed impossible. It seemed like madness. But the images did not lie. The frozen bodies of children floating in space did not lie. The desperate eyes of the physician did not lie. Han called an emergency meeting of Earth's United Coalition. Representatives from every nation gathered in the Great Hall, their faces appearing on screens around the world. She showed them everything. The debris fields, the refugee fleets, the ancient laws of the Galactic Council that permitted genocide as long as it stayed in one place. When she finished, the hall was silent. Then everyone began talking at once. We can't get involved, said the representative from the European Federation. We just discovered faster-than-light travel. We have 37 ships. The Council has thousands of worlds. This isn't our fight, added the representative from the American states. These aliens have been killing each other for 3,000 years. What can we possibly do? We can die trying, said the representative from the African Union. Her name was Doctor, and her grandmother had survived the Congo genocide of 2089. We can die trying to help instead of living as cowards who watched and did nothing. The debate continued for hours. Han listened to every argument, every fear, every doubt. She understood them all. Humanity was small. Humanity was young. Humanity had barely survived its own wars and disasters. What right did they have to interfere in something so vast and old? But she also remembered something her father had told her when she was a child. He had been a rescue worker, pulling survivors from collapsed buildings after earthquakes. He had said, "You never ask if you can save everyone. You just start saving whoever you can reach." When the debate finally ended, Han stood to speak. The hall fell silent. "I understand your fears," she said. "I share them. We are small. We are weak. We might fail. We might die. But I ask you to consider something. What kind of species do we want to be? What will we tell our children and about this moment? That we had the chance to help and chose not to. That we saw suffering and looked away just like the council." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We didn't survive our own wars to become bystanders to someone else's extinction. If we are going to join this galactic community, let us join it as we wish to be seen, as people who help, as people who care, as people who refuse to accept that suffering is just the way things are." The vote was called. One by one, the representatives made their choice. When the count was finished, Han felt tears in her eyes. The vote was unanimous. Earth would help. Within a week, all 37 of humanity's deep space vessels were being prepared for departure. Engineers worked around the clock, installing new weapons and shields. Medical teams loaded supplies. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers, more than the fleet could possibly accept. Doctor was one of those volunteers. She was one of the few people on Earth who had studied alien languages from the fragments of transmissions humanity had intercepted over the years. She was 42 years old, had never fired a weapon, and was terrified of space travel. But when she heard about the mission, she packed her bags and reported to the flagship New Dawn. Commander met her at the boarding gate. He was a tall man with a serious face and kind eyes. "Doctor, I'm Commander. I'll be honest with you. This mission is dangerous. We might not come back." "I know," said, "but if we don't go, who will talk to them? Who will translate? You can't end a war with weapons alone. Someone has to find the words." Smiled slightly. "You're right. Welcome aboard, Doctor." The fleet departed from Earth orbit on a cold morning in January. Millions of people watched from the surface, looking up at the sky as the ships disappeared into the darkness. Some prayed, some cried, some simply stood in silence, hopping. 3 weeks into the journey, the Galactic Council finally responded. Their message arrived on all frequencies, translated into every Earth language. "Species designation human. Your actions have been noted. The Galactic Council does not recognize your authority to interfere in the conflict. You are ordered to return to your home system immediately. Failure to comply will result in sanctions, including trade restrictions, diplomatic isolation, and possible military response. This is your only warning." Han recorded her response from the bridge of the New Dawn. She made sure it was broadcast on every frequency the Council used. "Galactic Council, this is Admiral Han of the Earth United Coalition. We have received your message. We understand your laws. We understand the consequences. But we also understand something you seem to have forgotten. Watching people die and doing nothing is not neutrality. It is cruelty. We will not turn back. We will not stand aside. If you wish to stop us, you are welcome to try. But you will have to explain to the universe why you attacked a species that only wanted to help." Han out. The Council did not respond. Perhaps they did not know how. No species had ever them so openly. No one had ever called their ancient traditions cruel. For 10,000 years, the non-interference laws had been treated as sacred. And now, a species that had only discovered space travel 2 years ago was tearing those laws apart with nothing but words. On the New Dawn, Doctor worked 18 hours a day, studying everything that had shared about their history She read translated documents, watched recorded broadcasts, analyzed language patterns, and slowly she began to notice something strange. "Commander," she said one night, her eyes red from lack of sleep, "I think I've found something. The N have been fighting for 3,000 years, but when I look at their oldest records, the ones from before the war, there's no mention of hatred. They traded with each other. They shared technology. They were almost friendly." "What changed?" asked. A moon, a small moon at the edge of their territories. Both sides claimed it. There was a dispute, then a battle, then a war, and then, she shook her head. Then they just forgot. Generation after generation grew up hating each other without knowing why. The moon doesn't even matter anymore. It's been abandoned for 2,000 years. They're killing each other over something no one remembers wanting. Stared at her, they forgot why they're fighting. Hatred became their identity. It became their culture, their religion, their reason for existing. The war isn't about winning anymore. It's about making sure the other side loses, about making sure they suffer, about revenge for things that happened so long ago that everyone involved is dust. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "So we don't negotiate territory, we don't negotiate power, we negotiate memory." Nodded slowly. "We have to make them remember who they were before the hatred. We have to remind them that the war had a beginning, which means it can have an end." Outside the ship, the stars stretched on forever, cold and ancient. Somewhere ahead, two species were killing each other in an endless cycle of revenge and pain. They had been dying for 3,000 years while the universe looked away. But the humans were coming, and they carried something more powerful than weapons. They carried the memory of their own wars, and the knowledge that even the deepest hatred could be healed. The human fleet arrived at the neutral corridor on a day that had no name. In the war zones, days were not named. They were simply survived. The neutral corridor was the dead space between and territory. It was where most battles happened. It was where ships went to die. The space was filled with wreckage from 3,000 years of conflict. Destroyed vessels floated like bones in a graveyard that stretched across light years. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, looking at the devastation. Even after weeks of travel, even after everything had told her, she was not prepared for this. The debris field was so dense that navigation was almost impossible. And somewhere in this metal graveyard, two fleets were hunting each other. "Contact," reported. Multiple vessels approaching from both directions. Signatures from the east, signatures from the west. "They're converging on us," added, "both sides." "Open channels to both fleets," ordered. "Let them know we're here to help." The channels opened, but the responses were not what she expected. The commander spoke first, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. What faction do you serve? Who hired you?" Before could respond, the commander cut in. "Tricks. These must be mercenaries. New weapons to use against us. Destroy them." "Wait," said. "We're not mercenaries. We're humans from a planet called Earth. We came to help end this war." Silence, then both commanders laughed. It was not a happy sound. "End the war," they said. "There is no end. There is only victory or death." "They killed my grandfather," they added. "My father, my brothers, there is no help. There is only revenge." Then both fleets opened fire, not on each other, on the humans. The first hour was chaos. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable than their enemies expected, but they were badly outnumbered. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Shields flickered and failed. The destroyer took a direct hit and broke apart, killing 40 crew members instantly. "Return fire," shouted. "Captain, we have to fight back." "No," said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "We did not come here to kill. We came here to help. All ships, evasive maneuvers only. Do not fire. Repeat, do not fire." The fleet scattered, dodging and weaving through the debris field. It was a desperate, impossible retreat. Lieutenant Shin, one of the best pilots in the fleet, flew her interceptor through gaps that should have been too small to pass. Behind her, hunters fired again and again, their shots missing by inches. Then her luck ran out. A plasma bolt caught her engine and her ship spiraled out of control. She managed to stabilize just before crashing into a piece of wreckage, but her systems were dead. She was drifting, helpless, directly toward the fleet. "This is Lieutenant Shin," she broadcast on all frequencies. "My ship is disabled. I am not a threat. I repeat, I am not a threat. I came here to help you. Please just listen." The ship surrounded her. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a tractor beam locked onto her vessel and pulled her into the largest warship. On the horizon's edge, watched her pilot disappear into enemy hands. She whispered, then louder, "All ships fall back. Regroup at the secondary coordinates. We'll find another way." The human fleet limped away, damaged and demoralized. They had come to save these people, and these people had tried to kill them. It seemed hopeless. It seemed insane. But refused to give up. She ordered the fleet to make contact with the High Command through back channels, using the codes had provided. If she couldn't approach both sides at once, she would try one at a time. Meanwhile, on the warship, Lieutenant Shin was dragged before an interrogation chamber. There were large, powerful beings with skin like stone and 4 arms that could crush metal. Their leader, a warrior named, stared at her with eyes that had seen too much death. "What are you?" he demanded. "Why did you not fight? Your ships had weapons. Why did you not use them?" Looked at him without fear. She was afraid, of course. She was terrified. But she had grown up in a family that had survived the Korean reunification wars. Her grandmother had told her stories about soldiers who chose peace even when peace seemed impossible. "We came to help," she said simply. "Not to fight, not to kill. We came because we heard that people were suffering here, and we thought someone should try to stop it." Laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "Help, no one helps. The Council does not help. Other species do not help. Why would you?" "Because you needed it," said. "Because 3,000 years is too long to suffer. Because even if you hate us, even if you kill us, at least we tried. At least we didn't just watch." Was silent. He had been a warrior for 50 years. He had killed hundreds of. He had lost his entire family to the war. He had never once questioned why. The hatred was in his blood, in his bones, in every thought he had. But this small, strange creature was looking at him with something he had not seen in decades. Compassion. Real compassion. Not pity, not fear, not calculation. Just simple care for another living being. "You are insane," he said finally. "Maybe," agreed. "On Earth, we have done terrible things to each other. Wars, genocide. We almost destroyed our own planet. But we also learned that the only way out of hatred is to stop hating, not because your enemies deserve it, but because you deserve to be free of it." The interrogation lasted 3 days. Asked questions. Answered. She told him about Earth's history, about the world wars that killed millions, about the slow, painful process of healing, about the belief held by many humans that no suffering was inevitable, that all cycles could be broken if people chose to break them. On the 3rd day, released her. He gave her back her ship, repaired and refueled. He did not explain why. "Go," he said. "Tell your captain that they will not attack your fleet again. Tell her that we are curious. Tell her that of the Eastern Fleet would like to talk." At the same time, Captain Park finally reached the High Command. She stood before their Supreme Commander, an ancient being named who had led the military for 200 years. His 6 eyes were tired, full of grief and exhaustion. Showed him Earth's history. She did not hide anything. The concentration camps, the nuclear weapons, the environmental collapse, the billions who had died because humans could not stop fighting each other. "We know what you're feeling," she said. "The rage that becomes bigger than reason. The hatred that feels like identity. We lived it. We almost died from it. Studied her for a long time, and you survived." "Not by winning," said. "Not by destroying our enemies. We survived by choosing to stop. By deciding that the cycle of revenge would end with us. By realizing that the dead don't care who wins. Only the living do." Turned to look out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, his fleet was hunting. Somewhere out there were hunting his people. It had been this way for longer than anyone could remember. "You ask the impossible," he said quietly. "I know," replied, But impossible things happen every day. 3,000 years ago, your ancestors couldn't imagine this war. Maybe you can't imagine peace, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means someone has to be brave enough to try. Closed his 4 lower eyes, a sign of deep thought among his people. When he opened them again, something had changed. There will be a ceasefire, he said. Temporary, limited. The High Command will meet with your fleet, and, he paused as if the words were painful, and if they agree, we will talk. For the first time in 3,000 years, we will talk. Outside in the cold darkness of space, the guns fell silent. Not forever, not yet. But for the first moment in 3, no one was dying. The humans had arrived, and somehow, impossibly, they had made both sides listen. The ceasefire was fragile. It was like holding water in cupped hands, precious and ready to spill at any moment. But it was real. For the first time in 3,000 years, and we're not killing each other. The Galactic Council was not pleased. Their response came in the form of sanctions. Earth's trade routes were blocked. Human colonies were isolated. Ships carrying food and medicine to Earth's outer settlements were turned away at checkpoints. The Council made their position clear. Humanity would suffer until they fell in line. Admiral Han received the news while standing on the bridge of the New Dawn. She read the list of sanctions twice. Then she called for a fleet-wide broadcast. This is Admiral Han. The Galactic Council has decided to punish us for helping people in need. They want us to abandon thee and go home. They want us to be silent. They want us to be like them. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. They were tired, they were scared, but they were still there. My response is simple. We're not leaving. The Council has watched children die for 3,000 years. Their consequences mean nothing compared to that. If they want to starve us, let them try. If they want to threaten us, let them threaten. We will not abandon people who need our help just because helping is inconvenient. Her words were broadcast across every Council frequency. Every species in the galaxy heard them. For many, it was the first time they had ever heard someone say no to the Council. On the ground, the real work began. Human medical teams established stations in the war zones, on shattered worlds where hospitals had been destroyed centuries ago. They set up shelters in the ruins of cities. They brought food, water, and medicine to refugees who had forgotten what kindness looked like. Nurse O was one of those medical workers. She was 35 years old, originally from, and she had volunteered for this mission because her mother had been a nurse during the Asian flu pandemic. Her mother had always said that healing was not about medicine. It was about presence. It was about showing people that someone cared. Worked in a field hospital on a planet called IV. Half of the population had been killed in raids. The survivors were starving, sick, and hopeless. When arrived, they looked at her with empty eyes. Another outsider, another person who would leave. She didn't leave. She worked 18-hour shifts, treating wounds, delivering bobbies, holding the hands of the dying. She learned enough of the language to say, "You're safe now, and I'm here." She cried in private when no one could see, because the suffering was too vast to carry without tears. Then the prisoners arrived. A patrol had captured 12 soldiers and brought them to the hospital. They were injured, exhausted, and certain they were going to be executed. Guards wanted to put them in a separate building, far from the other patients. "No," said, "they stay here. They get the same treatment as everyone else." The guards were shocked. They killed our families, they burned our cities." "They're injured," replied. "That's all I need to know." She put the soldiers in beds next to patients. She treated their wounds with the same care she showed everyone else. When a warrior woke to find a medic bandaging his arm, he began to weep. He had been taught since birth that we're monsters, yet here was one saving his life. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why help us?" "Because you're hurt," she said simply. "Because you're alive. Because everyone deserves care, even enemies, especially enemies. That's how the hatred ends." Word spread. Stories about the human hospital traveled through both and territories. Stories about nurses who refused to choose sides. Stories about doctors who wept for their patients, regardless of which species they belonged to. Stories about a strange, young race that seemed to believe mercy was more important than revenge. Meanwhile, Doctor continued her research. She spent weeks studying ancient texts, records that had been buried for. She traveled between and archives, comparing histories, looking for the truth about how this war had begun. What she found changed everything. She called an emergency meeting with Captain Park, commander, and representatives from both the High Command and the Eastern Fleet. They gathered on a neutral ship, sitting across from each other for the first time in 3,000 years. "I've discovered something," said. Her hands were trembling as she activated the holographic display. "Something that both your governments have either forgotten or hidden." The display showed genetic data, spiral patterns of DNA compared side by side. "They and share 94% of their genetic code," explained. "That's more than humans share with chimpanzees, more than almost any two intelligent species I've ever studied." Supreme Commander leaned forward, his 6 eyes narrow. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're related, closely related. Your species had a common ancestor approximately 50,000 years ago. There was a diaspora, a split, possibly due to a natural disaster or a colony ship that went off course. The two groups evolved separately, but the core is the same. You're not ancient enemies." She paused, looking at the stunned faces around the table. "Your family, your cousins who forgot each other existed." The silence that followed was enormous. The commander stared at as if seeing him for the first time, stared back. They had spent their entire lives hating each other's kind. They had killed members of each other's species. And now they were being told that it was all a war between relatives. "This cannot be true," whispered. "I've checked the data 17 times, said. "It's true. The war started over a moon, a piece of rock that neither side even remembers wanting. But long before that, your ancestors walked together. They shared food. They told stories under the same stars. You are not natural enemies. You were separated by time and distance, and the separation became hatred, and the hatred became identity. But it doesn't have to stay that way." Stood up, his 4 arms clenched into fists. For a moment, everyone thought he was going to attack. Instead, he turned and walked to the window, staring out at the stars. "My father died hatting," he said quietly. "My grandfather died hatting. They taught me that hatred like it was precious, like it was truth. And now you tell me it was all built on forgetting, on a lie." "Not a lie," Commander said gently. "A wound. Wounds become infected if they're not treated. Your wound has been infected for 3,000 years, but wounds can also heal, even old ones, even deep ones." Rose and walked to stand beside, 2 ancient enemies looking out at the same stars. "I have a daughter," said. "She is young. She asks me why we fight. I never had a good answer. I told her it was tradition. I told her it was necessary. But I never told her it was right because I don't think I ever believed it was." Turned to look at him. "I have sons. They are angry, full of fire, eager to kill. I trained them for war because that's all I knew, but I never wanted that for them. I wanted them to live, to build, to be more than soldiers." "Then give them that chance," Captain Park said, stepping forward. "Give all your children that chance. The war started because of a mistake, a forgotten history, a wound that no one treated. But you can choose differently. You can be the generation that remembers. You can be the ones who stop." And looked at each other, enemies, cousins, strangers who shared blood they had never known about. "It will not be easy," said. "No," agreed. "Many will refuse, many will want to keep fighting." "Then let them see something different," said. "Let them see you shake hands. Let them see you talk. Let them see that the impossible is possible. That's how change begins. Not with everyone, but with someone, with you." slowly, hesitantly, extended one of his hands, looked at it for a long moment. Then he reached out with one of his 4 arms and took it. It was not a peace treaty, it was not an end, but it was a beginning. And across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched in silence. For the first time in their ancient history, they had no idea what to do. The young species called humans had done something they had believed impossible. They had made enemies remember that they were family. The final ceasefire did not come from generals or politicians. It came from exhausted soldiers who simply stopped shooting. It started on a small moon called Minor, where a patrol encountered a scout team. In the old days, they would have fought to the death. Instead, the commander held up his empty hands. The leader stared at him for a long moment. Then he put down his weapon. They sat together in the ruins of an ancient temple, sharing water and dried food. They did not become friends. The hatred was too deep, the memories too painful. But they talked. For the first time in their lives, they talked to the enemy not as monsters, but as people. Word spread. On planet after planet, soldiers began asking questions. The genetic data that Doctor had discovered was everywhere now, shared through underground networks, whispered in barracks and hospitals. Cousins, they said to each other, we've been killing our cousins. Supreme Commander and Commander met again, this time on the restored moon where the war had begun. It was a small, barren rock, barely large enough to hold a single city. For 3,000 years, it had been abandoned, too damaged by the original conflict to be worth fighting over anymore. Now it would be reborn. The signing ceremony took place in the ruins of the old colonial building, where the first shots had been fired. Human engineers had worked for weeks to make it stable enough to hold people. Captain Park stood with her crew, watching and leaders took their seats across from each other. There were no weapons in the room. There were no guards, just 2 species who had spent 3 trying to destroy each other, finally ready to try something else. Spoke first. I cannot undo the past. I cannot bring back the billions who died. I cannot heal the wounds that have been passed down through generations. But I can say this, the war ends with me. My children will not inherit my hatred. I will not learn to fear your face. Whatever comes next, it will be different. Nodded slowly. My ancestors taught me that we're evil, that they deserved extinction. I believed this for 50 years. I killed for this belief. I ordered others to kill. He paused, his face heavy with grief. I was wrong. We were all wrong. The war was built on lies and forgotten history. Today we remember the truth. Today we choose a different path. They signed the treaty together, their hands touching the same document. When they finished, there was silence. Then, somewhere in the crowd, someone began to clap. It was Nurse O, her eyes full of tears. Others joined her, and clapping together for the first time in 3,000 years. 6 months later, the Galactic Council summoned humanity to answer for their violations. The Great Hall on the Council was vast, designed to make visitors feel small. Representatives from 10,000 worlds looked down at the human delegation. Captain Park stood alone before them. She had been chosen to speak for Earth because she had been there from the beginning, because she had been the first to refuse to look away. Species designation human, the council speaker announced. You are charged with violating the non-intervention protocols, interfering in a registered regional conflict, and destabilizing the established order of the galaxy. How do you respond? Looked up at the thousands of faces staring down at her. She thought about the debris fields she had seen, the frozen children floating in space, the exhausted soldiers who had stopped fighting because someone finally gave them permission to be tired. I respond with a question, she said. For 3,000 years this council watched the war. You watched billions die. You watched entire planets burn. You watched species go extinct. And you called it neutrality. You called it wisdom. You called it the law. She paused, letting her words echo through the hall. But laws are made by people. They can be changed by people. And a law that allows genocide is not wisdom. It is cowardice dressed up in fancy words. The council chamber stirred with anger. Several representatives shouted objections. The speaker called for order. Continued, her voice steady. You call us young, reckless, naive. Maybe we are. We've only been in space for a few years. We don't understand your ancient traditions. We don't understand why suffering is acceptable as long as it stays in one place. She looked directly at the speaker, meeting his eyes without flinching. But I do understand this. When we found thee and they had been killing each other for longer than human civilization has existed, your council could have stopped it at any time. You had the power, the resources, the technology, but you chose not to. You built a system designed to let people suffer. You didn't keep the peace. You just organized the dying. The hall was completely silent now. No one had ever spoken to the council this way. Humanity will never be like you said. We will never watch a child burn and call it policy. We will never measure lives against convenience. And if that makes us criminals in your eyes, then your laws need to change. Not us. She turned and walked out of the hall. No one stopped her. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. 17 council species formally requested human diplomatic assistance. They had watched what humanity did with the end. They had seen the impossible become possible. And they wanted help with their own problems, their own ancient conflicts, their own cycles of hatred that no one else had ever tried to break. The non-intervention protocols were suspended indefinitely, not because the council admitted they were wrong. They were too proud for that, but because they could no longer enforce rules that so many species now rejected. On the restored moon, a memorial was built. It covered an entire mountain with the names of every person who had died in the 3,000-year war, and worked together to carve the names, side by side, learning each other's languages so they could honor each other's dead. Lieutenant Shin visited the memorial on its opening day. She walked alone among the endless rows of names, reading as many as she could. Each name was a person, a life, a story that had ended too soon. At the base of the mountain, she placed a small stone. It was a tradition from Earth, from a country called Korea, where people left stones on graves to show that someone remembered. You're remembered now, she whispered. All of you. Not as enemies, just as people who deserved better. I'm sorry the universe took so long to help. I'm sorry we couldn't come sooner, but we're here now, and we won't look away again. Above her, she could hear the sound of children playing. Children and children, running together through the memorial gardens, laughing at games that had no sides, no winners, no losers. They did not understand why the adults cried when they watched them play. They did not understand how precious this moment was. They were just children playing together, the way children were meant to. Captain Park stood on a hill overlooking the memorial, watching the children run. Beside her was Commander, Doctor, and Nurse O, the crew of the Horizon's Edge, the people who had started all of this. Do you think it will last? Asked quietly, the peace. Thought about the question for a long time. I don't know, she admitted. Hatred doesn't disappear overnight. There will be setbacks. There will be people who want to keep fighting, but those children down there, they'll grow up differently. They'll have memories of playing together instead of killing each other, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's how real change happens, one generation at a time. Nodded, the universe is big. There will be other wars, other species who need help. Then we'll help them too, said. That's what we do now, that's who we are. Smiled, looking up at the stars. They seemed brighter now somehow, fuller, like they were paying attention for the first time in. The universe looked away for a very long time, she said. But we don't have to. We can be the ones who see, the ones who remember, the ones who refuse to accept that suffering is just the way things are. She turned to her crew, her family, the people who had crossed the galaxy to save strangers they had never met. Let's go find someone else to help. They walked back to their ship together, leaving the memorial behind. But the memorial would remain, and so would the peace, fragile and new and precious. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species were watching, learning, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they could be different too. The humans had come, and they had taught the universe to look again. The stars would never be the same.